All right, finishing up chapter 13. There's one piece left that I wanted to go over specifically out of that. There's a lot of other things that are in that chapter. Have you seen it's gone through a lot of different stuff in there? And one of the last things that I want to hit on in there is the heat. Because we do have mirrors that have heaters in them. So we're going to look at how to diagnose a heated back glass with a problem. I have a vehicle out here that has a vehicle or a problem in the back glass. It's my Jeep. One of the lands towards the top of it does not heat up. It doesn't defrost. So if there's frost on the back glass, when I turn it on, I end up with one little strip right across the back glass that does not defrost like the rest of it does. And so we're going to diagnose that, see where the problem is, and then kind of discuss what we got to do in order to fix it, to make that problem go away. Now, keep in mind, here's what we're looking for. Electrical circuits are electrical circuits. In a nutshell, what are we looking for? Do we have power to the component? Do we have a ground at the component? If we do, that's the two items we need in order for it to. And the next item is, do we have a control? So in some cases, we may have another control. Some items get power and ground all the time. For instance, like a lot of the newer blower motors, they have power all the time, they have ground all the time, but they only run at the speed that we ask them to, and there's a third wire that goes to it, and there may be more wires than that. It just depends on the circuit. We have to read how it works. But so like this back glass, the majority of it works, one strip of it doesn't. So right off of the bat, we ought to be able to figure out, we've done our diagnosis in our head already that fast. Hey, if most of it works, it's got to have power, it's got to have ground. It's got to be a problem with the load. But in this particular heater, the load is the glass. I could replace the whole back glass. That's possible. It'll come with a new heater grid on it, and it should work. And if it doesn't, yeah, you need another back glass. In some cases, that's my only choice. But in some cases, there's a repair kit that we can get for this. And so we can repair it, but we have to locate the area of the problem. And it's usually visible. If you look real close, you can usually see it. But if you can't see it, then there's ways to test it to narrow down where it is, and that's what we're going to do in the video. I'm going to do two different ways to test it, one using a thermometer and one using a voltmeter. The thermometer is going to narrow me down to what line it actually is. The voltmeter is actually going to narrow it down to the one little spot that has a problem. And then, after we finish this, we've gone through several different types of circuits. We've looked at wiper motors. They run multiple speed motors. We've got two inputs to it, and we can get high speed, low speed. We can get intermittent running. We've looked at at power seats and power windows. The motors are one speed. So they're reversible motors. Run forwards, they run backwards. Depends on power and ground. I just switch power and ground, and I can make them run forwards and backwards. The complicated part of those is we use a series of switches to make it happen. We're changing around where we're applying power. We're changing around how we're applying the ground through a series of switches. So if the seat moves forwards, but it won't move backwards, it's probably not the motor. It's probably not the motor. It's probably in the wiring or in the switch. If it doesn't move in any direction, now we've got to diagnose it. It could be a motor, could be a circuit in the switch. But we're going to have to trace all that out. So the idea of looking at these is, as you look through that, you'll see a lot of different circuits. They work in similar fashion. They get power, they get ground, and it does what it's doing. Light turns on, the seat moves, the power window moves. What we're looking at is, how are we getting power there? How are we getting ground there? This one's kind of different because this is a load can actually repair. Most manufacturers are going to tell you get another glass for it. Of course, they sell the glass, and so that's what they want you to do. But you can go in the aftermarket and you can get repair kits for them. It's fairly simple. Everybody's painted something before, and this is pretty simple. It actually comes with a template that you put down over the grid where the damage is, and then you're just going to take a little paintbrush, looks like maybe a little fingernail polish paintbrush, and you're just going to paint a new line on there. It is going to be visible. Don't tell your customer. They're not going to be able to tell that you did it. They're going to be able to tell that you did it, but it's going to work. I do it a little bit differently than some people do. I don't use the template that comes with it. It's usually wider than the grid that's on the glass, and that's going to show up real bad. So usually I get some good painter's tape, and I put my own line. I tape out the line that's already there, and then I paint the gap, and I remove the tape. And it makes it a lot less. It's still noticeable, but it's less noticeable. So it doesn't stand out as bad as if you put a 2 or 3 times a thick line on there, because that's going to show up really bad from both sides of the glass. And you're not going to have to look for it. It's going to show up. A guy in the car behind you is going to be able to see it. So let's take a look at these. We're going to go out. I'm going to show you 2 ways in order to diagnose it, and then we'll continue on from there. And then we're going to start into the next chapter, which is getting into instrumentation. How do we make these instruments work? How do the sensors work? What do they do? And so let's move forward. Let's go take a look at the car. And as always, have fun. See you. Okay, to show you what we're doing is over here on the side of the glass. As I get up a little closer, you can just barely see the lines and the reflection of the glass. These are the heater grid lines. Over on the side, you'll see this copperish looking bar. That connects all of those together. Somewhere on that is a is going to be a connector that allows the car to hook up to it. As you can see it right there as I focus it in. Now, I have seen those fall off. There are some repair kits out there that you can get to put them back on, and you have to be real careful with them because you do have to heat them up. You have to get them, they already come with solder on them. You put the connector on there, and then you have to heat it up till that solder melts. And remember, we got to get the grid hot enough to stick to the solder also. So you want to be real careful doing that, because if you overheat that glass, it will shatter, it will break. So usually I use a larger soldering iron to try to get it hot as fast as possible. Now, this side I have
my positive hooked up to. This side I've got my negative hooked up to. And I have turned on the heated back glass, and this is one thing you got to be careful of when you're testing this, because it will time out on you. They are on a timer, so you have to make sure it doesn't time out. If all of a sudden your readings don't seem right, it probably timed out. Now here's how I'm going to test it. Since I hooked to the positive and I hooked to the ground, and we have 11.1 volts back here, we've got power turned on. I've got power and I've got a ground. So all I'm doing is doing a voltage drop across the glass. So the glass is dropping, or the heater grid, not the glass. Glass is an insulator. The heater grid is dropping 11.12 volts going across it. And that's probably about right on this vehicle because my battery is weak. I've been doing so much testing and stuff with it and haven't really been driving it to get the battery charged up. So I did have to put it on a battery charger. Yeah, but I don't have a big one, I got a small one here. So it's trying to build my battery back up. So here's what we're going to do. You can see the voltage here. So if we're going to drop 11 volts across this glass, half of 11 would basically be 5.5, right? So what I'm going to do is take one of my alligator clips, and it gets kind of hard trying to catch the lines on it. That can be a little tricky. So here's a tip for you. Get a piece of aluminum foil and hook onto your test lead. And then when you put that on the line, just put your finger on it and make contact with the line, and you're more likely to make contact with it. Now usually what I do is I start right here in the middle. So to show you what's going on up here versus what I'm going to be doing down below with the gauge is, let me roll this over here a little bit so it gets a little bit tighter in the jaws, so it just clamps a little bit better. And I'll cut this part out of the video so you don't see it. There we go. As long as my battery holds up. Okay, so what I've done is I folded over this piece of aluminum foil a couple of times, and now I can just take it and put it on the glass itself. So what I'm going to do is put it on the glass and slowly move it down the glass, touching each of the lines. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to watch the meter. So right here in the middle, hey, I've got 6 volts. Pretty much a little higher than half of 11, right? So I'm going to go to the next one. 6.3, go to the next one. And I'm just going to continue down. I still have 6.3, next one. 6.4, I'm happy with that. 6.6, I'm happy with that. 6.5, we're good there. And this one, I've got nothing. If you notice, you got a reading, but up here in the corner, it says millivolts. So I've got nothing. So I'm going to go to the next one. 6.6. Go to the next one, 6.6, and go to the next one, and I got 6.5. So the one that I have nothing on is this one right here. So it's the, make sure I get the right one. So I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 up. So if there's no voltage drop, that means current's not flowing from there to there. So what I can do is, what I'm going to do is move this along and find out where my break is. And I'm going to show you on here, on the voltmeter, hey, there I've got 7 volts. If I back up just a little bit, I got 6 volts. Whoops, I'm on the wrong line, I'm sorry. 0 volts there. Move forward a little bit, 0, still have nothing. still have nothing. There I went to 8 volts. Let's see where I'm at. I'm at this spot right here on that line. And if I look at this real close, you'll actually be able to see there is a tear in that. I don't think you can see it, but right there I can see a discoloration in that line. So pretty much what we found is if I go here, I've got pretty much no voltage drop. If I go here, I've got 11 volt drop, full voltage drop across there at this point, because it's not going through any of the heater. So what that tells me is right in here, that grid is broken. Now there is a repair kit for that grid. So we can get a repair kit, and pretty much what you're going to do is tape lines across it. I usually recommend taping your own lines. The kits that I've had, the lines, they have a template in there for you to paint in the middle of, but it's a lot wider than what's on here, and so it becomes really visible. So I'll take a little piece of tape and put across here each place, and then I'll paint in between it, put about 2 coats on it, put 1 coat on, let it dry for a couple minutes, put another coat on, let it dry for a couple minutes, then peel the tape off while it's still wet. Don't wait till it dries. And then let it dry before you turn it back on. And it'll fix it. The repair kits, I used to get them from the parts supply houses, and they're not real expensive, and you can usually fix half a dozen or so glasses depending on how damaged they are, how many places. So this one only has 1. It's right there. Now there's another neat way we can do this. I can take a temperature gun. Now just to make sure we're still on, remember I told you these things will time out. So while you're diagnosing it, if something doesn't look right, check it, and you'll see we have 0 volts here. So I've got to turn it back on, so I've got to go back up, push the button again, turn it back on, and we'll take a look at our next method. Okay, I've turned this back on. We got battery power back to it. Now, here's another way we can do this. If I leave this glass on for a little bit, I'm going to take a temperature gun. And if you can see this right here at the bottom of the glass, we're at 110 degrees. And as I move up, let's see what happens to the temperature of it. See if it doesn't drop. Right there it's dropping. That's about 10 degrees lower. Go past it, back up again. Come back, this is 10 degrees lower. Go to the one before it. We're basically 100 degrees, 107 there, 95 there, 104 there. So that tells me this line is the one that's a problem, because the ones around it are hotter. You can even do this with your fingers, because I can feel a difference in the temperature. These are fairly nice and warm. This one, I can tell there's a temperature drop when I get there. So that's our second method.